Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to see you all here. My name is Antonio Gomez. I am from the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support based out of Illinois State University, and I'm going to be your moderator and technical support for today. Please hold all questions into the Q&A portion of the chat. Feel free to, however, in the meantime, post them to the Q&A window so that we can address your questions as we see them, or to just post them in the chat. We'll be happy to address them from there. If you have a question in the middle and would like to go ahead and speak up, you can just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll address it whenever we're able to. This webinar will be recorded. The recording will be available on apprenticeshipillinois.com on our partners page, and you will get an email when it's posted. You will also be offering closed captioning for this webinar, so feel free to go ahead and turn that on if you would like. And just to get us started, I'm going to get us a couple of polls going. So the first one here is who's all online? So you can take a second to answer this poll. We'll reconvene in a second. Excellent. We're getting some responses. Wonderful. It looks as though we've got some local workforce members, OEA directors, some business services people, and other staff and apprenticeship specialists as well. So welcome. We're happy to have you. We will have a second poll as well, which is where are you based? So let us know if you're coming from Northern Illinois, Central Illinois, Southern Illinois, or Chicago. All right. Looks as though we've got most of our responses in. So we got a lot of Northern, some Central, some Southern, and then a little bit of Chicago. And we're very happy to have you all. Without further ado, Nate, take it away.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Apprenticeship Illinois Lunch and Learn webinar series. Today's topic, using Standards Builder and collaborating with the United States Department of Labor. My name is Nate Carlson. I'm the Technical Assistance Program Manager for the Apprenticeship Illinois Grants. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat or throw up your hand. As we get into the back half of today's presentation, I might kind of keep with the flow and save some of the questions for the end, but generally speaking, do not worry about interrupting. This time is for you. This time is a support service for you to help you do the work that you do so well. So let's go ahead and get into it. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about our apprenticeship specialists. If you are an apprenticeship specialist, then you already know this. If you are a business service team member, then maybe you didn't know that your apprenticeship specialist does all these things, but they do. Apprenticeship specialists offer a completely free, full service support to employers who are interested in developing, registering, and launching a registered apprenticeship program. They offer local expertise and local connections, allowing employers and other providers to get connected to funding, resources, and partners in their area through personalized, on-the-ground support. Apprenticeship specialists also offer no-cost workforce consultations, helping to assess employers' workforce needs and designing a solution that works for their business, regardless of whether or not that's an incumbent worker project or an apprenticeship or a career fair or whatever it's going to be that's going to suit their needs. Most importantly, our apprenticeship specialists handle the heavy lifting on behalf of employers. They do the paperwork, they do the program submission, like we're going to talk about today. Our specialists take care of the details so employers can focus on growing their team. I tell employers we have the migraines so they don't have to, but as we'll see today, we don't have to have too many migraines because it's actually not that hard. Today's session, we're going to learn about what are DOL apprenticeship and training representatives and how can we work with them to provide employers with a streamlined registration process for their apprenticeship programs. What recent changes to DOL Office of Employment Policy Enforcement may impact your program development and registration during this program year and moving forward. What information is needed to register an apprenticeship program with USDOL, and how do apprenticeship specialists and other workforce staff submit programs to Standards Builder for approval. Now, I say Office of Apprenticeship, and some of you may not know what that means. So this is a map, obviously, of the United States, and you can see that it's broken down into two categories. The lighter blue states are Office of Apprenticeship states, which regulate and administer their apprenticeship programs directly through the federal government, through the United States Department of Labor. In the darker blue, we see that those are states that have recognized state apprenticeship agencies, which is to say they have a designated state agency that regulates and monitors apprenticeships within their state. And you can see this is kind of random based on region. It doesn't follow really any neat pattern in terms of, uh, how we generally might view states. You'll notice that surrounding Illinois, we have some that are Office of Apprenticeship states like us. That includes Michigan, Indiana, and Missouri. What's nice about those light blue states is in many instances, we have a faster process for offering reciprocity for those programs if they've registered a local program with the USDOL already. The dark blue states, because they are state apprenticeship agencies, it may be more complicated in terms of what that reciprocity looks like. If they have an existing program there, it may need some changes before it gets registered with DOL here. If we have a program registered with DOL here, it may need some changes before it goes there. None of this is necessarily incompatible, but it's just good to know in terms of having employers who are working across state lines. Later, we'll talk about national program standards. And when you submit a national program standards to USDOL, they're going to be immediately recognized and have reciprocity for all those light blue states, and it will still depend for those SAA states and territories. Apprenticeship training representatives. When we talk about the United States Department of Labor and the Office of Apprenticeship in Illinois, our ATRs are our first point of contact with USDOL. They work closely with our apprenticeship specialists, and they help program sponsors develop and revise programs for registration. Illinois currently has 4 ATRs and a whole lot of businesses. So one of the nice things about our specialists is they help reduce some of the labor required of our ATRs, and in doing so, are able to offer greater capacity to those ATRs. And because our specialists know how to submit programs, when our specialist programs then go to the ATRs for revisions and approval, it's usually pretty quick because they know we know what we're doing. So here are some general tips for working with your ATR before we get kind of into some of the more recent changes. First off is that collaboration requires communication. And this is especially important when we're working in a time of lots of changes and lots of policy distinctions that are, sometimes different week to week, day to day. So you're going to want to keep your ATR apprised of programs in development. I would say, in terms of, those of you who are using the Navigator tool, if you've marked a program as being in development, that would be a good time to reach out to your ATR and say, hey, I'm working with this employer on this occupation. Right now, we're still getting everything together, but I think we're going to shoot for X month getting this submitted, or within the next few weeks, we're thinking of getting this submitted, just so they know that's coming down the pipe, and they can bring up any potential red flags or occupation or sector specific issues they may determine. Ask permission, not forgiveness, right? Sometimes the joke we hear is ask forgiveness, not permission. We don't want to do that with our ATRs. Especially now with the way policies are somewhat being more strictly enforced. If your program is doing something out of the ordinary, if it's got like 12 RTI providers for some reason, if you've made extensive changes to competencies or significant changes to program length, these are things that your ATR needs to know in advance so that if they are a problem, they can be addressed sooner rather than later when your employer is like, hey, we submitted this program 3 months ago, what's happening? And you're like, well, we're figuring it out. You want to be detailed in your correspondence. This isn't to say to send your ATRs paragraphs and paragraphs. If you work with Bruce Hallam especially, he won't read it. He'll just call you up, and God love him for it because he works pretty fast. But you want to be specific when referring to employers, the regions they cover, and the occupations and development for your program. As I noted, we only have 4 ATRs for the whole state who are responsible for the employers within their region, and they typically have a lot of balls in the air at once. So please don't make them track down your old email for context. Don't just be like RE program. Be specific in your correspondence just to make sure that we're not creating extra work for them. At this point, I want to change gears and shift into some of the newer guidance we've received from the DOL Office of Apprenticeship staff in the state. There's a lot of kind of like gossip flying around and some inconsistent communication on both ends. So this is stuff that we have confirmed. I'm not going to do anything that's speculative. You may have heard things from your ATRs last week, this week, everything's in flux. All we can do is keep each other informed. But this is what we know for sure, is that current policy is that all registration documentation must be completed in Standards Builder with no more document uploads. We'll see later on what this entails. Previously, we used to be able to upload the Word documents for the work process schedules or the list of courses for a supplemental education or RTI related technical instruction provider. They don't want that anymore. And previously, some ATRs were using Standards Builder, some weren't using it. Now everybody is using it for sure. And when we put information in, we need to do it manually. If you put something as a document upload and you see it get denied or rejected or asked for revisions, don't be surprised. This is how they want things currently. This means program submission is going to take a little longer because you have to manually type in all of those things. I usually said, I would allocate 45 minutes to an hour for a program getting submitted. I might extend that now to an hour and a half. Just to make sure you've got time. So if you are budgeting, allocating your time for submitting a program, just bear in mind that putting in some of this information manually rather than via document upload is going to take time. Additionally, the Office of Apprenticeship is now going to be stricter regarding adjustments made to program length. If you've got a program that's registered as a 3-year program and you say, actually, it's going to be 1 year, that's not going to fly anymore. They're going to be really strictly adhering to that 25% change. So if it's 2 years, you can go 2.5, you can go 1.5. But anything beyond that's probably going to get rejected or may require you to write a letter explaining why. If you are making significant changes to existing competencies on the work process schedule, we'll see that in a bit, where, in their estimation, it would go beyond that 25%. Again, that may be something you see difficulty with. And then RTI hours. And I want to be clear on this so there's no confusion. If the program length is determined to not be sufficient for the number of RTI hours for the program, that's going to draw a red flag from Office of Apprenticeship. So if you've got a 1-year apprenticeship program, 2,000 hours on the job, but then the RTI you list is, 600 hours worth of RTI, they're probably going to say that's not sufficient. They're not going to be able to get 600 hours of RTI done in the course of this 1-year program. So we really want to make sure it's not like they're not saying it has to be 144 hours only or that it needs to be a minimum value, but they are going to be taking a closer look at whether or not the on-the-job training hours and the RTI hours can feasibly be completed during the time frame of the program. So if a program you submit gets flagged for any of these reasons, you may be required to submit a letter to your ATR justifying these changes or exceptions, a justification letter before your program receives approval from DOL. So be prepared to have an explanation for the decisions that have been made in the event that that happens. So now I want to kind of shift gears. We're going to start working towards, actually submitting a program to Standards Builder now. And so I want to review the information we need to submit a program to Standards Builder. We call them the 3 C's of registered apprenticeship, right? We got competencies, coursework, compensation. Competencies: what skills should the apprentice have completed by the time they have finished their apprenticeship program? What do they need to know how to do their occupation? Coursework: what training is the apprentice going to receive in a classroom or other environment to support their skills growth and supplement the on-the-job training they receive? And compensation: how much is the apprentice going to be paid and how are they going to earn their wage increases? Are they moving through the program in a competency-based format, a time-based format, or hybrid-based format? Again, we've heard rumors that we're no longer going to be looking at a lot of hybrid-based formats. I don't have that confirmed personally, but just know that that's something that's been going around. The 3 C's are a complete package that we can present most of to employers upon our initial consultation. We're able to previously brainstorm and prepare options for work process templates from apprenticeship.gov. If we're working closely with our training providers, as we should be, we may be able to provide them with a menu of options in terms of the certificate and degree programs available in their geographic region. And then we're able to just revise and help them choose those components as necessary. Lastly, the progressive wage schedule, that third C, compensation. We know this can be as simple as two numbers. This can be the program starts at $17 an hour and it finishes at $22 an hour. Ideally, it's going to be more than that. We're going to build a few additional rungs in that ladder, and we'll actually see what that looks like in a bit. But that's ultimately the employer's decision. As with everything in regards to registered apprenticeship, these programs are employer-driven first and foremost. So 80% of this paperwork can be completed prior to meeting with an employer. So it's always good that we're making sure that we have brainstormed in advance of meeting with an employer so we're not wasting their time. And also so we can streamline the process of identifying these components to get ready for program submission. So if we were going to find a word process document, we would start here at apprenticeship.gov. We can search by ONET code. For those of you who aren't aware, onetonline.org is a fantastic workforce resource in terms of occupation data. It can let us know the training providers on the ETPL for any number of occupations. It can give us a region-specific wage information for any number of occupations, and it crosswalks quite nicely with apprenticeship.gov, which can be very useful in program development and registration. So we can either type in the ONET code there or the title of the occupation. For this one, I searched up automotive technician specialist, and we can see that it offers me with a RAPIDS code. That'll become important in a bit for identifying the template we've selected within Standards Builder. It gives us a time-based, competency-based, and hybrid-based Word doc option for each of these templates. Now, it used to be we could just download one of these documents by clicking on the hyperlink here, revise it, and then upload that in Standards Builder. Now we're not going to be able to do that. I would still recommend having a Word doc version of your competencies for reference as you're going through the Standards Builder process, and just as a good rule of thumb to have that documentation somewhere. But know that you can no longer do that easy document upload. But we can still use apprenticeship.gov to source these templates. This is what a work process schedule looks like. We see all the usual information. We have the job title, job description. We have the ONET code that corresponds for that occupation, as well as the RAPIDS code that corresponds to not only which occupation is it, but which version of a previously registered program are you using as your template. So we don't want to just know the ONET code that we're using for our template. We also want to know this 4-digit RAPIDS code here, and those will have 0023 CB 0023 TB 0023 HY for competency-based, time-based, and hybrid. And then the competencies, again, this is review for many of you, I know. We would revise these with the employers to make sure they reflect what the occupation looks like at the employer's location. In addition to those 3 C's, we're going to need to know the size of the company, the address for the company, their hiring procedures. This needs to be standardized. This is one of the ways in which registered apprenticeship programs can help facilitate diversity. We need to make sure that all applicants are going through the same processes. The minimum hiring requirements for the role in terms of, do they need to have a driver's license? Do they need to be a specific age? Are they interested in opening the program to other employers? This will become important when we go to the next slide. And are they going to pay for classroom time? You'll see here we have some additional guidelines for IBHE approval, and this is something that we have not necessarily talked about a lot in the past. So please tune in here because there have been recent issues that have come up with this. If your program will serve multiple employers with employer-provided classroom training, if your employer is doing their own training, but they're also inviting other employers, so they're going to charge a fee for that curriculum and training. If your program is going to use any form of WIOA or state funding, or if your program changes the modality or location offering of an existing training provider, it likely requires IBHE approval as a certified training program. If you don't know, if you're not sure if any of these apply either to a program you currently have or a program that you have in development currently, it's better to ask than not know, because this is a whole thing. So On the next slide here, I have, and you'll all get these slides sent out as a copy, and these are hyperlinked, so you can check these out. The actual policy for which programs are going to require this approval, the system and application information, and then I have a contact for IBHE. If you have questions about this, if you're like, hey, here's some information on my program, can you please let me know if this is something I need to worry about? I'll be honest with you, this is new to us. We're all kind of coming to terms with this at the same time as many of you. So I would really recommend reaching out to IBHE directly, just because they're going to know more than I am about their own policies and procedures. So at last, we have all of the information. We have our 3 C's, our miscellaneous information. Now we want to actually access Standards Builder to submit a program for approval to DOL. Anyone can use Standards Builder. Unlike Rapids, which requires approval granted by an ATR or being associated directly with a program, all it takes to access Standards Builder is a login.gov account. You can create a login.gov account at the link I have listed here. A real pro tip based on my own experiences, make sure you have long-term access to your multi-factor authentication methods for your login.gov account. If you use the same app for everything and that connects to your Outlook or your Gmail for work or school or whatever, feel free to use that, but also make sure you have some additional phone number or email address listed, because if you lose access to your multi-factor authentication methods and cannot verify your login.gov account will be deleted. They're pretty strict about that because it is the federal government. So just bear that in mind, because if your account is deleted, you will lose any programs you have on your Standards Builder account. And this has happened to me. So speaking from experience here, make sure that doesn't happen to you. And then we can navigate to Standards Builder from apprenticeship.gov. I've hyperlinked the actual link to get there in this slide. Being frank with you, if you just type apprenticeship.gov Standards Builder into your URL bar, you'll probably get close. Because a Standards Builder is technically an application that's housed inside of like login.gov services, it's hard to link to it directly, but you can access it from that website on apprenticeship.gov. This is what it looks like when we finally pull up Standards Builder. We can see here we have a few options. We can view any programs we've previously submitted. We can download any number of reference documents, and we can create new standards. And we can see the arrow pointing to that, create new standards. That's the first thing we're going to do to get started. It's going to ask us if we are creating this standards for ourselves or if we are acting on behalf of another sponsor. Now, if your local workforce area or you are representing, an intermediary partner who is going to be acting as the program sponsor, then you would select the first. And if the employer partner is going to be their own sponsor, you would click the latter. You would say acting on behalf of another sponsor. It's going to ask some information about us. We're going to give them our first name, last name, contact information, all that good stuff. It's going to ask then about our apprenticeship program. It's going to say, how many states does the sponsor currently operate in? Now, what this is trying to determine is what kind of apprenticeship program you are registering. So kind of the functional question here is, how many states does the employer want this apprenticeship program to operate in? So unless you know for a fact that the employer is really interested in registering those national standards to get that reciprocity in all those light blue states on the map, it's best to just indicate one state here because it's going to direct you towards a local program anyway. It's going to ask us a few more questions. It's going to ask us how many people are employed at the organization and how many apprentices does the sponsor intend to employ in the next 2 years. And all of this is determining whether a local or national apprenticeship program is the best fit. In the majority of cases, it's going to tell you that you're going to make a local apprenticeship program. Lastly, it also asks us if they're interested in administering a program for employers external to their organization. If you are working with a first-time intermediary, the answer to this question would be yes. If the employer is interested in offering that training to other employers in their sector, the answer would be yes. Again, here is where it's important to determine whether or not they have received approval from IBHE, and if not, definitely check into that because they will enforce those policies. Once we've put that information, it's actually going to ask us for the sponsor themselves information. Now, if that's you, you would just put in your information again. For our example here, we are working with Demo Derrickson, who is working on an automotive technician apprenticeship, and we've put in his email and telephone number here. Weird thing, but in this kind of digital age where we're all doing Zoom meetings and not everything is in person, you may not necessarily have the employer's direct phone number. So make sure to ask that at some point if that's not a way that you're regularly communicating with them. Even if it's like in their email signature, still ask so they don't just get a phone call from DOL one day and go, "Who gave them my phone number?" It's going to ask about the sponsor's organization. Here we see it's Derrickson Automotive. We put in the address, the city, the state, the zip, and the county. And it's going to tell us, oh, this is local program, and here is your state director. We don't currently have a state director, so for now, that's TBD. And finally, we move into kind of the meat and potatoes, the steak and potatoes, the majority of the time we're going to spend in actually submitting the program is in verifying the following information for each occupation. And you see here, just like on apprenticeship.gov we saw before, it allows us to search by an occupation title or by an existing ONET code. I typed in automotive technician, and again, we can see all these different options that come up under different ONET codes. That's why it's important to know the ONET code specifically for the template we're working off of. I clicked on the ONET code for 493023, but then even then we can see under that ONET code all of these different templates, all of these different employers who have registered different versions of this program, and those are going to have different RAPIDS codes. So again, that's why it's important that we know those numbers on the front end so that we don't click on the wrong one and then we're looking at the wrong competencies or we have the wrong program length. We want to just know that going in. I've selected RAPIDS code 1034. This is a wide range. It says 0.3 to 4 years. I don't think that's correct. You'll see here that most of these programs are either, kind of fall within the like 1 to 2 years or the 4 to 5 years. Know going in what kind of program your employer is looking for. If it's something where the occupation is only registered as a super long-term program, that's something you may need to address with them before moving forward. Once we have selected the occupation with the appropriate RAPIDS code and ONET code, it's going to allow us to add a custom occupation title. Usually, we're just going to match whatever the employer uses internally, unless they've specified otherwise or they want to leave it as is. If you don't put in a custom title, it will default to whatever was originally registered under that RAPIDS code, which for this one would be undercar specialist. So if we wanted automotive tech, as we do for this demonstration, we'll put that in there. It's then going to ask us about the apprenticeship approach. What type of apprenticeship is it going to be? Is it going to be a time-based program in which apprentices earn their progressive wage increases by meeting certain metrics of time, either in the program as a whole or with the hours they've spent training a specific competency? Is it going to be a competency-based program in which the apprentice's assigned mentor figure either determines when they have reach the necessary threshold for that competency or administers some kind of skills-based test on the work site? Or is it a hybrid-based program where it is a combination of time and competency-based thresholds that the apprentice must reach in order to progress through their program? As I noted earlier, word on the street is hybrid programs no longer in vogue with DOL. We don't know that for sure. It also allows us this drop down here with which to adjust the program length. This automatically only lists options within that 25% window. So if you are using Standards Builder, it shouldn't even be an option for you to change that too significantly. But even so, be aware that they are cracking down on significant changes to program length. Next, we're moving on to our competencies. We can see here the list of competencies, just like was in that word process schedule. And you can see that we have the option to delete them with these little red X's here on the right-hand column. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom of the competencies, we'll see that we can edit the work activities. Now, previously, again, we could have just uploaded our own Word doc. They don't want us to do that currently. So instead, we are going to go in and manually add, remove, and revise these competencies to reflect changes the employer has made. And that looks like this. It's tedious, but it's not rocket science. You probably can determine how it works. We have a header for each section. We have the actual task. We can add tasks or remove them with the red X's. If we were removing the entire category, we would click remove work activity. And again, I would just suggest that as we're moving forward, if you are making significant removals of competencies from a program, be prepared with a justification letter for why those competencies were not adequate or did not apply to the employer's work site. We've put in our competencies. We would now shift to putting in our coursework information. It's going to ask if our organization is the one providing related training. If you're acting on behalf of an intermediary partner, you would put yes. Similarly, if the employer is acting as the training provider, you would put yes. We can see here I filled this out for a training provider. Once we've put that information in, we can feel free to continue. We have a raised hand from Antonio, it looks like.
Yeah, this seemed like a good place to insert this question. Diana Schuler put a comment quite a few slides back talking about competency hours. She said, so the rule of thumb had always been 2,000 hours of OJT and 144 hours of RTI a year, regardless of if it was in 1 year or in a 4-year program. So please go back and explain the 500 RTI for 1 year not being sufficient. She's just wanting a little bit of clarification.
Sure. Yeah. So for clarification there, the issue currently, Diana, is not that they consider that 500 hours to be too little. It's that they think that 500 hours might be too much for the amount of on-the-job hours that apprentice will complete. So it's not as though they're saying the program has to have at least 500 hours. They would be saying, based on the number of OJT hours, we don't believe that the apprentice will have time to sufficiently complete all of these OJT hours and all of these RTI hours in the same year. Whether or not that concern is valid is really not our place. Well, we do need to be prepared to offer justifications if there are heavier course loads or a significantly larger number of related technical instruction hours. This hasn't come up a ton of times yet, but just to be aware that if your program is a program that utilizes an associate's degree and you're saying it's a 2-year associate's degree and a 2-year apprenticeship, that might raise an eyebrow. It may be likely that they want programs with that kind of significant coursework to be of a longer length of 3 or 4 or 5 years. Again, that's not an official policy. This is just a pattern that some of the ATRs have noticed regarding RTI hours and program length. Once we have added all of the training providers we need for the program. So we can see here I listed Lakeland, that's a community college. Let's say they're offering the training, but let's say we also have somebody who's doing like third-party OSHA training for an occupation. We would add them there as well. And it's important to note that we add all of the providers before we go in and list the specific courses. So make sure you list all of them before you move to the next section. Once we've added all the training providers, we're going to go in and actually add the courses the apprentices are going to be taking. For this, we had them completing an automotive technician associate's degree. And so for each class they would take as part of that associate's degree, at minimum, you need to put in what the subject is and the number of contact hours is. If you're working with a community college and they have course numbers and learning objectives or course descriptions available, I would recommend having that information on hand and including it if you can. It's better to give too much information than not enough. You'll note at the top here that we have a SIP code, a classification of instructional programs code. You'll note that we only put one for the whole program. So if you have an associate's degree for auto tech and they've got to take a speech class or a math class, you wouldn't need to find the SIP code for a math class or a speech class. The fact that the entire program is generally about auto tech means that we would use that SIP code. And so we can see here, I've put in the course number, the contact hours, and you would do this for every course that they're completing as part of the apprenticeship. So whether that's 4 classes, whether that's 20 classes, whatever it looks like, you would have all of that information filled in here with the appropriate number of contact hours. There have been some rumblings that the way DOL kind of identifies and calculates the number of contact hours per like a lecture credit hour at a college, that those calculations and math may be changing. Again, we don't have anything for sure on that, but that has also been a rumbling that we've heard. Typically, it has been like 15 credit hour or 15 contact hours to one lecture credit hour. So like 45 contact hours for a 3-credit lecture course, and then 20 contact hours per lab credit hour. Antonia's got a hand up, so we've got a question.
Yep. Emily Perks from the chat has asked, if our employer doesn't know if they're an IBHE approved trainer, what are the next steps?
Absolutely. So I listed the IBHE contact there. The first thing I would do is reach out to them and say, hey, I'm Emily Perks. I work with Mandercon. We're helping this employer with an apprenticeship program. I would if they don't some of the qualifications don't apply, if they're not providing training to outside employers, but they are using WIOA funding, that's something where it may be case by case, but we still want to know for sure, because we've had like actually accredited training providers getting their wrists slapped by IBHE because they changed the modality of a program to fit an apprenticeship and didn't get that approved. They also provide exemptions. So even if you think an employer like definitely doesn't qualify under that, but you want to make sure it's not an issue, you can help them apply for an exemption. And all of that information is going to be on the IBHE website that's linked from this slide deck. Now we're going to add the probationary period for the occupation. This is usually 25% of the program's total length. I don't see a lot of changes to that typically. It's worth noting that many employers, in addition to the formal apprenticeship agreement, will also have some form of additional contract or agreement with the apprentice in place, especially if they're covering significant coursework expenses. That is not related to this, but it does somewhat come into play because of the probationary period, offering that if the apprentice quits within that probationary period, they can do so without stated cause, simply by notifying the other party in writing. Generally, this is just whatever the total program length is divided by 4. So 4,000-hour program is 1,000 hours. 2,000-hour program, 500 hours. And just as a refresher, when we say 2,000-hour program, that typically means 1 year. 2,000 hours is about full-time hours for a year. So a 2,000-hour program generally means a 1-year program. A 4,000-hour means a 2-year program, and so on. Now we're going to put in that third and final C, the compensation. We're going to put in the wages. And we can see here, it can be just as simple as putting in that entry wage, $17 an hour, and that completion wage, $28 an hour. And we can do that based on hourly rates, or we can put in a salary. I've not seen an apprenticeship that does their wage schedule based on salary. Must be nice, but that is an option. Just as we can have only 2 levels, we can also build in as many rungs of that progressive wage schedule ladder as the employer wishes. We can see here we've got one where at 0 competencies, they're making 17, 5, they're making 1975, 10, 2250, 15, 25, 25, and lastly, when they hit that 30 competencies, that's when they're going to make that end wage of $28 an hour. Now, if you click this add additional wage level button, and you put in a number of competencies, it will automatically determine like what percentage of the mentor wage that is in this second column here. That there's not a rule about that. There's no rule that says it has to be 60% of it. That's just really for your knowledge. If the employer wanted to have a specific percentage of the mentor wage tied to a number of competencies or hours, if this were a time-based program, they can use that as a tool, but it's not like a guideline or a restriction on the wage schedule. The wage schedule can be fully customized. The description box is super useful, especially in hybrid-based programs, where let's say the employer wants to say, if you have these 5 competencies and you have successfully completed the first semester of coursework. And so we could put in that description box, 5 competencies and completion of first semester to add that additional component if we wanted to. So again, fully customizable. Next, we're going to put in what the selection procedures for this occupation looks like. It's worth noting that we assign selection procedures not for the entire program, but for the occupation. So if a hospital has like a super competitive registered nursing apprenticeship program that they want, multiple rounds of interviews and this and that, and they've also got a CNA apprenticeship where they're like, we'll take anybody with a pulse, they can have different selection procedures in place for those two occupations. And what it will do then is show us kind of a review of everything we've put in for this occupation so far. So we can see the competency based, we can see the program length, the total number of hours of trainings, the apprentice to journey worker ratio. Generally, that's going to be 1-to-1. The current hourly completion wage rate, all of this information, and then we see at the bottom we can either add another occupation, which means we're going to do all of that again, but for the next occupation the employer is looking to register, or if we're only registering one occupation, we're going to go ahead and click next. But it's worth noting the employer can register as many occupations they want when initially registering. They're not limited to just one. And so it's oftentimes super useful and time saving in the long run. If they know what they're looking for, it can all be registered in advance. So once we've put in all of that occupation-specific information, we're kind of going to shift gears, some of the more like broader legal information for the program. For instance, we want to know, will the complaint contact be the same as the sponsor contact information that we put in earlier? Most of the time, this is going to be a yes. However, larger organizations especially may have somebody who in HR who's like their designated person for handling that kind of thing. If you're working with public sector folks, they might have like a Title IX administrator who this might be the complaint contact, or we would click that no button. Most of the time, it's just going to be whoever you've been emailing. We're going to set the minimum qualifications. Now, this is not specific to occupation. This is across the board for all of the occupations they are registering. So you put minimum age. If they have that, if they require a driver's license, you would check that box. This is a time where we can create and expand accessibility for programs by saying, we live in an area with robust public transit services. Do we need a driver's license, or could we put reliable transportation to and from work in that other qualifications box? And those are just things we can do in sort of a consultative nature to help make sure that the program isn't inadvertently excluding candidates who might be great fits for their program and for the workforce. Any physical requirements there, like if you need to lift 50 pounds, stand for 14 hours straight, whatever the job may entail, you can list that there as well. They're going to ask here, will apprentices be paid for hours spent attending related training plan classes? This is a small question with big implications, right? If you've got somebody working 40 hours a week and also doing 15 credit hours worth of community college coursework for their occupation, that's a recipe for burnout. Granted, we also know that employers don't necessarily want to pay full time and benefits to somebody who they only have in the facility 20 hours a week. So you'll note here that this doesn't say, is the employer going to be paying them their apprentice wage during training plan classes? It just asks if they're going to be paid at all. So there are some employers who may not pay the apprentice wage for classroom hours. They may pay minimum wage for classroom hours, or they may provide some form of travel stipend each week for those hours. And so if they're doing any of that, we would click yes. And if they're not doing any of that, if they're not paying any form of wage for classroom hours, they say, hey, we're paying for the training, that's enough. We say, okay, good luck with that. We'll go ahead and click no. Does the employer or sponsor have any additional requirements for apprentices to receive credit for previous experience? You'll note that in the description line here, it says apprentice applicants seeking credit must furnish such transcripts, records, and affidavits. So it's already asking them if they want to transfer into a program to provide that documentation. But if the employer is saying, okay, you want to move halfway through our wage schedule, I don't just want to see it on paper, I want to know that you actually know what you're doing, you might select yes here and say, we have a number of on-the-job competency-based tests that we might administer to determine their progress, which is all fine, but again, they just need to have that on paper in advance. You'll note here the Equal Opportunity Employment Pledge. Here we have, it asks us if we have any additional protected bases, but actually the state of Illinois does have a significantly longer list of EEO protections than the country as a whole. So anytime you're submitting a program for Illinois, you should be including these. These include protected basis for sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, military status, unfavorable military discharge, arrest records, order of protection status, pregnancy and childbirth, citizenship, and work authorization status. So for any Illinois programs, these should be added as additional protected bases. In addition, if you're in Chicago, you have even some more additional EEO protections for against discrimination based on credit history, criminal history, parental status, housing status, and victim of domestic or sexual violence. And once you have this slide deck, you can just copy and paste those there. Is your program affiliated with a union? We'll check yes or no. It says here most apprenticeship programs are not affiliated with a union because we know that some employers would get to this point and see the word union and freak out, so they need to clarify that most programs are not affiliated with the union, so most of the time you're probably going to be answering no to this. And then lastly, what it's going to ask is, the work that we do is based on these existing templates for the most part, right? So it's going to ask you, is the employer comfortable with letting their competency list, their training outline be public information? Generally speaking, they're not going to have an issue with this. You won't have to check the box. If they have developed the perfect list of competencies that they want to keep as proprietary information, then you could check that box. Again, that's something you should ask them. Most of the time, the employer is not going to have an issue with sharing the love, making sure these resources continue to be available for new employers. So we've put in the information for the occupation, and we've put in the information for the program as a whole. It's now going to give us one last opportunity to review our program standards before we submit. It will allow us to actually download a draft version of the standards themselves, which is to say what this all looks like in paper as a PDF file. If you want your employer to review it one more time, you might view those draft standards, save that as a PDF, and save an exit. And then once they say it's good to go, submit. Most of the times, I've already reviewed all of this information with the employer before I get to this point, so I can just go ahead and click, okay, I'm ready to submit. So after we've submitted our program, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to inform our employer partner, the ATR who we're submitting to, and any IBST member who may have referred us this employer that the program has been submitted to Standards Builder. This is a good step so that the employer knows that you're taking care of business and that their program is on its way to approval. It's good to let the ATR know so that they don't let this one sit. Not that they let them sit, but it doesn't hurt to be like, hey, I got this one submitted. And then for IBST partners, referrals are so valuable, and our partnerships with our integrated business service team partners are so valuable. It means a lot to folks to get back to them and say, hey, that person you referred to me, and we submitted their program. That's great news. Who doesn't want to know that they helped make that happen? You want to ask your ATR to include you on any follow-up correspondence regarding program revisions or approval. If you've submitted a program as a third party on behalf of an employer sponsor, the correspondence will not go to you automatically unless you tell your ATR, hey, let me know. The reason I have this highlighted is because I have had programs where I was submitting as a third party, and the ATR and Standards Builder auto-emailed the employer, and it went to their spam. And I didn't get a copy of it. And so for 3 months, we were like, what's going on with this program? Before we realized, oh, all of these links for signatures are in the email spam folder, and I wasn't included on them. So asking your ATR to include you will prevent that from happening. Make sure that you continue that transparency. And then, if needed, prepare justification letters for any of the things we've talked about today, significant changes made to a program's estimated length, competency list, RTI requirements, if significantly above 144, and any number of RTI providers. We've seen recently some, the ATRs have been instructed to ask, like, why are there multiple RTI providers? There are a number of reasons why there can be multiple RTI providers for a program. Either they're covering different curriculums or they're covering different geographic areas. And that's what we would put in a justification letter. Okay, so that is our presentation for the day. When you actually submit, it pops up a little thing that says congratulations. But I'm not going to show you that. I'm going to make you earn that yourself when you submit a program. But no, seriously, it is that simple. And we can make this a streamlined process for employers. In addition to this Lunch and Learn webinar series, I want to let you know I've got open office hours Mondays and Wednesdays. Additional to that, I'm available by appointment. Just shoot me an email. Most of the time, if it's a weekday and I'm online, I'm happy to jump on Zoom with you, answer any questions you have. I'm an open resource for employers, our Apprenticeship Illinois grantees, workforce partners in general, intermediaries. Something I do pretty often is, our newer navigators, especially our newer specialists, will have me on the call when they do a first call with an employer, and I may talk the whole time if that's what they want, or I can just be there as backup and answer any questions that they don't know yet. Please, my calendar is your calendar, and I ask you to use it because we're all here to work together. We have great webinar recordings and resources available at apprenticeshipillinois.com on the Workforce Partners page. Please check that out. And if you have any recommendations or requests for resources about a specific apprenticeship topic, if you're like, hey, it would really help with this employer if I had a one-pager about this, shoot us an email, let us know. We create these resources based on what we know and see that you guys need. So we don't know if we don't hear it. So with that, I'm going to shift to Q&A. And I'm going to stop sharing. And if we need to pull back up any screenshots, I can do so. And if not, well, I'll just get to look at each other. So any questions about Standards Builder, about any of the recent changes to our DOL submission process, anything we can help with before we jump off today? Feel free to put your questions in chat or raise your hand or come off mute. And if there are no questions, I'm just going to assume that I killed it and everybody gets it now. If you have any questions, if you are in the process of submitting a program to Standards Builder and need help, again, I am happy to jump on Zoom and you just screen share and we go through this together. Nothing is too minute of a process because that's our job, right? Our job is the details and thinking through these details so the employers don't have to. Thank you all for your time today. I'm excited about the work that we are doing to expand apprenticeship in Illinois, and I'll turn things back to Antonio and say thanks, everybody.
All right. Any last minute questions? Last call. We log off. I'm getting a lot of thanks in the chat. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care.